I always love comparing two products with similar features that are priced differently to try to help you determine which one is right for you and your budget. Today we are looking at two SMSL DACs, the D-6S at $200 and the DO200 Pro at $400. So why is one double the price? And more importantly, does it offer a sound that's twice as good as the cheaper one? Now, whenever I compare two products like this, I like to get as up close and personal as possible to help you determine which one might be the best for you and your budget. Now, at the top here is the 6S, and this is the DO200 Pro. For the sake of this video and my sanity, I'm just going to call this the 6S and this the 200 Pro because I keep accidentally saying either DO Pro or D0 Pro, and I don't want to have to figure that out throughout this entire video. So 6S and 200 Pro. Let's start comparing these right now. One of the most obvious differences between the two units is simply the size. The 6S is smaller than the 200 Pro, and it has this matte black finish here that shows you the file resolution, while the 200 Pro has this colored screen here, and that shows you actually the volume decibel level and then the file size in a smaller font here and then your input there. And that's because you can actually use the 200 Pro as a preamp. You cannot do that with the 6S. That's one of the major differences. However, one of my pet peeves with the 200 Pro is this screen here, when you're using it not as a preamp in fixed mode, and I'll show you that in just a second, but basically this stays the same and you just look at 0, all the time and your file size is so much smaller down here. I sort of wish that if you're using it in fixed mode where you're using the volume with your preamp, that this size of resolution would pop up here. It would get larger rather than be so small. So for instance, here's the pre mode and you can cycle back and forth between variable and fixed. Again, that's not something you can do here with the 6S. Okay, let's talk DACs. The 6S uses the ES9039Q2M, while the 200 Pro uses 12 CS43131 chips. That's right, 12 chips versus 1. So it's going to be an interesting when I talk about sound later to try to determine if we're going to hear that much of a sound difference, not only between the different Brandon DACs, but the fact that this 200 Pro is using 12 while the 6S is just using 1. Now, both of these units use the same op amps. The 6S has 4 OPA 1612s and the 200 Pro has 5 OPA 1612s. Now, both of these units give you the ability to use filters. If that's something that you're interested in, I don't find filters make that much of a difference when using these DACs, but if you are someone that likes using filters, both of these have 5 filters each. And both of them, if you're still interested in MQA, can handle both regular MQA and even processing MQA CD. Turning these units around, we start to see some more similarities, and now we start to see some differences. The main similarity that I want to mention is that both of these come with remote controls. Now, the other main similarity is that they both have the same output options. They both offer balanced and single-ended, which is pretty great. Now, for an input, that's where things start to differ. They both offer Bluetooth connectivity, which was easy to connect to, and I never lost a signal. USB on both, which was easy to connect my computer to. I didn't have to download any drivers. Both have optical and both have coaxial. Where things really differ is that the 200 Pro has HDMI ARC. So the main difference between these two units is that the 200 Pro can be connected to your TV and also used with gaming devices. And I think that helps explains the $400 price tag versus the $200 price tag. This is really more for like home stereo or headphone use. And even though the 200 Pro is obviously for home stereo and headphone use, you can take it to the next level by connecting TV or gaming devices to this. Also, one other thing to note, the 200 Pro has 2 USB modes, and including 1.1, which is a drive-free for gaming, and regular 2.0. Well, that explains the difference in features and functionality between these two DACs, but we need to talk about the sound of each and how they differ, if they differ at all. But before we do that, I want to point out how much I really enjoyed listening to both of these DACs. SML has done a great job with each at its price point. Overall, they both have a very neutral sound without any coloration. They both provide lots of detail, and they are both very clean and quiet without any noise. Overall, they are very easy to listen to. Now, in trying to determine if these two DACs offered two very different sound signatures, I listened to them in two scenarios. The first being in my regular home stereo setup. Now, keep in mind, I have done all of this research and I've read about both DACs, and I know the 200 Pro is offering 12 DAC chips in its design, while the 6S only has one DAC chip. And even at that, they're different DAC chips. So my brain is telling me that I should hear a difference. At least I think I should. And I listen to a lot of music, going back and forth between these two. And again, overall, I absolutely love the sound of each. But I'll be honest with you, I really couldn't hear a major difference in sound. And it kind of stumped me a little bit, because there's definitely people that say all DACs sound the same, but I've definitely heard DACs with a different sound signature. I thought this would be interesting because they're both designed by SMSL, and given that one's got 12 DACs and one's got one, I thought that might be where the difference lies. But I just couldn't really dial one in while listening on my home stereo setup. So I thought, you know what? Maybe I should get out my headphones and connect it to my Ship Magni Heretic amp and compare each of them with my headphones instead. The first track I listened to was I Love My Baby by Nina Simone off her album High Priestess of Soul. Now the good news is both of these DACs produce the same sort of air and space around her vocals, which is important because during this song, the instrumentation completely drops out and she's singing a cappella. And you were able to hear that texture in her voice and the air and just the overall space by both of these DACs. The 200 Pro didn't really produce that any better than the 6S, even though both of them produced them at an excellent level. Now, the next song I listened to was from a band called Dead, D-E-H-D. And the song is called Big Love off their album Blue Skies. Now, this is just a fun, in-your-face, very loud, forward indie pop jam. And I really couldn't hear that big of a difference between the two DACs when listening to that song. However, when I listened to a song called Bebop, of course, by Christian McBride and Edgar Meyer off the album But Who's Gonna Play the Melody, this is where, if I had to nitpick, I could hear a slight improvement with the 200 Pro over instrument separation. Now, this album are just two guys playing bass, and hence the name Who's Gonna Play the Melody, right? And at times, it's just bass playing all over the place. They're using a bow, they're plucking, they're playing scales, they're soloing, and at times with the 6S, all that got a little bit jumbled. But the 200 Pro did a little bit better of just separating those instruments so that, you know, you could just follow the soloing over the scale playing behind it a little bit better. But it wasn't a complete night and day difference over the 6S, which still played the song back great. Both DACs, the bass was very musical and a pleasure to listen to. So after saying all of this, am I now claiming that all DACs sound the same? I don't think I'm going to go that far. What I'm trying to say is that if you're trying to decide between these two DACs, you're not going to get $200 worth or twice better sound by buying the 200 Pro over at $400 over the 6S at $200. So take sound improvement out of the equation. I think when you're trying to decide between these two, you need to think about features and functionality. Most importantly, the 6S at $200 is going to go right into your home audio system or headphone system and do a great job. But if you're looking to connect a television or gaming device, then you're going to want to spend the $200 more and go up to the 200 Pro. I really think that that's where the difference lies in deciding between these two rather than the sound. Now keep in mind, when I'm trying to determine if I can hear a sound difference, it's simply subjective based on what I heard. If measurements are important to you, I don't have the ability to measure products here, but I know ASR gave the 6S an excellent measurement review on their site. I haven't seen one for the 200 Pro yet, so it'll be interesting to read about that later on and see how it measures. All in all, overall, both of these DACs are awesome. Both are great. My only little nitpick was with the screen functionality on the 200 Pro. I would just change it up a little bit and make it more intriguing. But otherwise, both of these work great in my system, and I enjoyed listening to both. You're really not going to go wrong with either. Now, if after watching this video, you're starting to think you want the 200 Pro because of the TV compatibility, you should watch this video that I did of a product that I reviewed earlier this year from SMSL, which is actually an amp with a built-in DAC that allows for the same connectivity. That might be of more use than just a standalone DAC. If you'd be interested in learning more about that product, you can do so by clicking here.